Okay, you're being recorded.
Well, we and all sentient beings, until we achieve enlightenment, go for refuge to Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. We and all sentient beings, until we achieve enlightenment, we go for refuge to Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. We and all sentient beings, until we achieve enlightenment, go for refuge to Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And then through the virtues that we collect by giving and other perfections, may we become Buddhists for the benefit of all. May all sentient beings possess happiness and its causes. May they be free from the suffering and its causes. May they never be separated from the happiness that is without suffering. And oh, may they abide in equanimity without feeling close to some out of attachments or distant from others out of hatred. In the space before us is the living Buddha Shakyamuni, surrounded by all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, like the full moon surrounded by stars. And from the third Kabapa Mahamudra prayer, having obtained supreme leisure and endowment, possessing faith and diligence and wisdom, having relied on good spiritual friends and received the essence of their instructions, may we practice them properly without any hindrances or obstacles, and thus enact the sacred Dharma in all our future lives. And through the study in the words of the Buddha and the treatises of logic, we are freed from the veils of unknowing. And then through reflecting upon the oral instructions, we overcome the darkness of doubt, and through the light born from meditation, the true nature shines forth as it is. And may the brilliance of the three wisdom flourish and spread, and any and all merit that we will generate this morning through the listening and instructions and the contemplating and receiving the benefit. For we do this for the benefit of all beings, so that they too may achieve a liberation beyond all measure. Om.
Thank you. Before we jump to the book, and do have it handy because there's a couple of pages that we will refer to through these few slides. We are, I think, all of us doing a variety of practices. That's not new. We've talked about that before. I think what has sparked this for me is, again, the application that the text we are reading right now is constantly encouraging and in eliciting, invoking from us, is in tandem, indivisible, inseparable from the way of the world right now, and the also inseparable nature of the collective of humanity, the collective of life, and in fact the sameness, hence collective, the sameness of innate nature, Buddha nature. So all of these non-divided, if you will, and yet specifically manifesting features of our personal day because of our practices and our mind stream and our interests and our resonance, etc. The particular book we're reading and how each of us engages what's in the sentences, the paragraphs, the pages, and his variety of instructions. And then what's going on with the world, all of it seemed to coalesce into a few little slides as I was receiving, as anyone can, from YouTube, something from Garchen Rinpoche that Jane's been, receiving as well for days. So I want to make sure that we are all on the page that is non-dual. I want to support that within everyone. That means that, for instance, when all of the leaders of the world, the spiritual leaders of the world are encouraging prayers and practices, they're doing that quite often with a reference to the degradation of the times. That's been so of the native and indigenous elders now for, a few decades, if not longer, and certainly for the Tibetan Buddhist community, as it has, experienced its own diaspora, its own horrors in its own native country, and yet, the diaspora has meant that we all have, everyone in the West, has now this tremendous gift of the lamas, the Rinpoches, and their teachings on YouTube on a regular basis. I mean, that's non-dual right there, right? The devastation of Tibet, the hardship over, 50, 60 plus years of the Tibetan people, and certainly, Jen has been there. I don't know if anybody else has, but you see it firsthand. So each of the Rinpoches, each of the great lamas, the Dalai Lama, the Karmapa, all of the various Rinpoches that each of us has resonance with, that we participate with either in person, have been there, watch regularly on YouTube, etc. Each of them has, because they are tulkus, they remember many things of their past lives. And they remember certain times when it was difficult. They might remember a teaching that they've received, and they might remember that they were alive at a particular time. And certainly, all the elder ones have lived through, again, the devastation of Tibet, the devastation of their homeland and their own monasteries, and escaping, by donkey and on foot, on yak and on foot, from that devastation. So they have prayed. They have done very particular practices during pestilences, during famines, during drought, during fleeing, during when they needed to disappear from the visual knowing of someone who would want to kill them. And they did practices. And those particular practices are very deep within them, and they use them regularly. And so as we read from Trungpa, and he refers to whatever lineage, or he collects all the lineages together into one little sentence, and we receive that gift, or we listen to the Dalai Lama, who has, over the last 3 months, invited and encouraged very particular sadhanas. And the Karmapa, was doing every day for over a week, he was rotating different prayers and sadhanas to supplicate the protectors and to avert the hardship of disease and pestilence and death. And another sadhana he was working with and giving on YouTube had to do with those who were dying and how to support them in their journey through the bardos. And then you have Garchen Rinpoche and everything that he's been doing, including going into retreat. And of course, there are several lamas that have been doing that. And, others, Zongzag Khyentse, Mingyur Rinpoche, etc., all the ones that we are, again, aligned with, have resonance with. They all are offering of specificity, and at the same time, within that specificity, they who abide in non-dual wisdom compassion, they know that whatever practice they are encouraging, the specificity of it is because we need specificity. That we are supported by method and sequence and specificity. That we are, in our habits of consciousness, that to tell us, well, if you do this in the morning, or you do such and such with Tara or with Chenrezig or whatever it might be, and you do this so many times, or you do this with a certain attitude, that will support, others. It will also ripen your bodhicitta and things like that, because we need to be instructed in that way. They are giving instruction in that way. I mean, it's just such great compassion on their part, because they know that all of it's the sameness and all of it's emptiness. But we can't, we don't live on that bhumi yet. we don't abide on that bhumi quite yet, So their compassion descends with the conduct. Wow, of course. I'm sorry, their view descends, right? To descend with the view and ascend with the conduct. So they do that. I encourage people to watch 5 minutes or so of Gachin Rinpoche, because they love. What is love? That's not for me to say, it's for all of us to contemplate, which is exactly what he encouraged. When you contemplate love again and again, you see that all happiness in the world comes from that. Well, even that first sentence, is an instruction. When you contemplate, and that especially, I think, is encouraged when we think we are, or feel that we are, speaking from or acting from love. Contemplate right then. What is going on? What is this sensation? What is this feeling? And is it love? What is love? Is it one thing? Is it many things? And what kind of happiness in this moment is coming, if any, from this word or action or thought of love? He reminds us, of course, as has every single Lama or Rinpoche that I know I've been watching for the last 2 months. Every one of them has repeated that outer material happiness is not what is important. They have said it in every context possible. They have reminded us that that's just not where the emphasis, putting the emphasis there is not going to bring us happiness. And so Gotcha Rinpoche reminds us, as we all know, at least theoretically, conceptually, and I think in our practice, that the most important source of happiness is, of course, the inner happiness of the mind, and that depends on love. Please notice that in his words is a feedback loop. And that feedback loop is oral instructions. And that feedback loop is right action, right thought, right view. It's the Eightfold Path right there. The picture of the dragon was chosen specifically and with much thought before we read the quote, because the dragon, of course, in China is considered a great and auspicious, and it is that of healing and that of wisdom, and the masters, the adepts, are called dragons of wisdom and compassion. And yet, when our self-grasping is what is forefront for us all, then we end up being eaten by that self-grasping. We have lost sight of the pearl, the jewel that is at the heart of this dragon that you can see there, the white jewel, the pearl of great price. We've lost sight of that within us. And so Gotcha Rinpoche continues, suffering has a cause. And when we do not separate from the cause of suffering, we cannot avoid the result of suffering. That's the state of the world. And that's why we are in what is called degenerate times and degraded times, because the causes of suffering have not been properly addressed. And if the inner mind is not happy, not at peace, not tranquil, not open, not accepting, not soft, not malleable, disentangled instead of entangled, then all material things just become another source of suffering. And why would the inner mind not be happy? We have to ask ourselves, it seems as though, I've got everything I need, and, why do I still have my moods? Why do things go up and down? Why do I look out to the world and cry? Because of afflictive emotions of the mind. Driven by afflictive emotions, he says, we act out in body and speech. And we want to, germane to our text, and if you want to turn to page 133, we want to, through our day, again, hold ourselves as often as possible in contemplation. Let everything be, every moment be the teaching and the teacher that it is. So that when Gotcha Rinpoche reminds us, driven by afflictive emotions, we act out with body and speech. Yes, of course, there are the blatant situations of that, the ones that everyone would say are acting out through afflictive emotions. There's anger, there's, obvious attachment, obvious things. But as we hold ourselves in contemplation through the day, it's all the ways that our afflictive emotions are, and our inner mind not being in a state of bliss in a state of emptiness, bliss, and clarity. It's all our habits, all our actions that have self-grasping, that have a sense of self even as their core, and acting out from that. And this, my sixth ray can come across as whatever, again, whatever afflictive emotions are in it, but it's in this contemplation, it's in this constant, ceaseless awareness on whatever measure and level and frequency that we can do that with ourselves, that all the ways that we just don't recognize the self-grasping and the self that we are taking to be real, we start to at least notice it more and more, which I know you all are doing. But I want to encourage with the Garchen Rinpoche, with all the lamas, with all the Rinpoches, with all the elders of the world. I want to encourage myself first, of course, to be tireless, to not forget the essential practice, because whatever is the additional practice, the Tara sadhana, the Chenrezig sadhana, the Sojon, the Lojon, the Ched, it doesn't matter what it is if the self-grasping is still what is the majority of one's day. Page 133. The Hinayana begins with taming the mind. Taming the mind is very straightforward. You just relate with things as they are. That's it. And so when Gachin Rinpoche says, contemplate love again and again, well, we want to do that when we are feeling love, when we are not feeling love, when we are feeling love for the sky, love for our dog, love for food, when we are feeling aversion, when we are feeling anger, we want to contemplate love again and again. And when we feel ourselves being hungry, yes, in fact, that's a form of suffering. That our body actually hungers. There are people who that doesn't happen. And certainly for the Buddhists that doesn't happen. So there's a cause. There are causes there, including the causes and fundamentally the cause of our mind. Because we actually see this body or interact with our body as if it's factual as we see it and touch it. There isn't for most people, there isn't the simultaneity of recollecting that things are not as they appear. Things are not as they, as we touch them. Things are not necessarily as they are to the five senses. The series that Gachin Rinpoche is doing, and that, that this little bit is just pulled from the part one. what is interesting, and as Jane, told me about it, a little bit about it, I said, "Oh, you mean Lojong?" And she said, "No, I'm pretty sure it's Sojong." And yes, of course, that's what he's talking about. The beauty of all of these practices, whether it's lighting an incense and a candle, it's remembering, a particular sadhana, it's Sojong, it's Lojong, it's no matter what it is. The reasons, the set of reasons why all the Rinpoches are inviting us to do the particular ones that they are saying, and they all is for reasons already stated. But what is so perfect and so beautiful about them all is what they all have in common. And what they all have in common is that they are training us in bodhicitta. It's that simple. It's that profound. And so Gacha Rinpoche says when he's teaching on this, that the Sojong is the root of all Dhamma practice. I smiled as I listened to him because I've certainly watched many teachings on YouTube of Gachin Rinpoche, and I've heard him say that same sentence. Only instead of Sojong, it will be whatever he's teaching is the root of all Dhamma practice. I've heard him say that same exact sentence, probably 8 times with 8 different subjects. So I smiled because it took me back into my own, mind that where it clings to specificity. And I stopped and I pressed pause on the video. And I said, I definitely have heard him say that same sentence before. Every time he teaches. So why? And then of course, the answer is right there. The answer is what's underneath and what underlies all of the practices, not just Tibetan Buddhist practices. In that context, we call it bodhicitta. But, all the elder practices around the world are about heart-mind, are about awakening to what's real, are about seeing what is real. As Trungpa said, taming the mind is very straightforward. You just relate with things as they are. Bodhicitta is to relate with things as they are. In all the ways that they are, the dimensional, the emptiness, the Sambhogakaya that everything is, that presents and before us right now as we're sitting in our room. We could choose to see it all as Sambhogakaya if we wanted to. And that would be just as true as to only see it as the Nirmanakaya, the appearing manifestations of phenomena and Buddha nature. So let's just finish up with a couple of quotes from Trungpa. Page 212, the very first sentence. The attitude that brings about the possibility of mindfulness is mind's awareness of itself. Your mind is aware of itself, which means that you are aware that you are aware. So if we go back to Gachin Rinpoche, so Zhang, so means to restore. To restore what? To restore our awareness back to itself. Instead of not being aware. to contemplate love again and again. Contemplate that suffering has a cause. Contemplate. To contemplate is the mind aware of itself. It's definitely, part of that. Page 210. Hold on, I gotta find my fingers here. In the middle of the page, if you seem to be working with your breathing and having thoughts at the same time, that means you are unable to identify completely with your breath. There is some deception in thinking that you can work with the thoughts and the breath at the same time. There are so many layers of teaching in those two sentences. Per usual with Trungpa Rinpoche. Fundamentally, it all boils down to the word deception. And the fundamental, the ground deception of our own, every time we choose ignorance instead of choosing awareness, when we default to, this body is solid, or this body is hungry, or this body is tired, as an example, to default to that choice of mind, which fundamentally is a non-happy inner mind state. Why is it fundamentally a non-happy one? To go back to what Gajah Rinpoche was saying about a happy, when the inner mind is happy. So to just stay with the example of the physical body and physicality, to default to it being solid, dense, lasting, etc., being mine, all the things that anyone could say. That is to enforce self-deception, because none of it's true. The aggregates don't exist. They certainly don't exist in the way that the five senses perceive them. The five senses don't really exist. They certainly don't in the ways that we are habituated to think and experience that they do in those limited ways. So we're always reinforcing deception, actually self-deception. And what is the antidote to that? The antidote is contemplation. The antidote is that we are actually self-aware. But we have to remind ourselves that we're self-aware. And then contemplate any moment of every day that we can. It's all so simple, so common, so ordinary, and so profound. And so lastly, I think it's the last one. Let's take up 188. In the middle of the page, the paragraph begins, why will meditation free us, and how is it going to work? It works by picking up your end of the stick. And that's what Gachin Rinpoche has encouraged, as well as everyone else. rather than by tackling mind as an enemy or a friend. You work gently using the system developed by the Buddha, which is to let go and to tighten up. You loosen or let go by means of the out-breath. You tighten up or concentrate by using the body. Again, volumes and volumes of teaching here. Fundamentally, he's teaching non-duality. Hold both things simultaneously. We have to learn to do that through sequence. Hence, breathe in, breathe out. There's a sequence. And when you breathe in, you do this. And when you breathe out, you do that. When you breathe in, you think of this. And when you breathe out, you think of that. So, by great compassion, boundless compassion, these wonderful beings that have graced us, our lives and the world, give us sequence, give us method, because we need that specificity. But what underlies all of the methods is a non-dual wisdom compassion, which is the bodhicitta of our very nature. We are our own medicine Buddha. We are the medicine that can heal this world. Not because I or you or anyone, the Dalai Lama, the Karmapa, Gachin Rinpoche, it doesn't matter. Not because of the specific of the person, but because Buddha nature is of one nature. We are shared consciousness. We are shared awareness. Which is why when we contemplate love again and again, then we are contemplating that with all of humanity. Our very contemplation on the cause of suffering in any given moment is in that moment to benefit so many beings, not because I'm doing it or you're doing it. It's because we are inseparable from the totality of consciousness and the totality of awareness of all of life, but certainly all human beings. So when Gachin Rinpoche says, contemplate love again and again, he is telling us exactly what the Buddha has said. Illumine your way. Because as we illumine ours, we are illumining it for all beings. It's so simple and it's so profound and it's just so full. So that's that. We'll leave it with Medicine Buddha here. And I'm wondering if you guys have any thoughts. Hi, Joy. I just finished a little thing and I'm asking people if they have thoughts.
Well, Nona, I just want to thank you for all your contemplation and your studies that you've been doing, and that you are sharing this with us. How uplifting it is, and I know from what you've said that it is bringing benefit into the consciousness of humanity. So uh, thank you again for your words and thoughts and speech.
We all
Second that,
bow.
Kathy. Thank
We all bow to one another.
you. I guess if I have anything that strikes me right this minute is the simplicity that you have emphasized of how simple it is. And yet, in our daily life, we complexify, and our lives are a bunch of complexity. And, at this point, we're looking, I think, more for simplicity and speak for myself. And it's a journey to get back to that simplicity, but the profundity of the simplicity, the slowing down, the being in the moment, that everything that's been encouraged here, the contemplation, it all makes sense theoretically, of course, but as we do it more and more, it just opens up so much that has been missed by the complexity. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm always reminded and we had it in the Buddhist text through the ages, the statement by the Buddha about entanglement, that the mind, it's a little specific to theorizing and asking questions that really don't have an answer, and that the answer would not satisfy the mind anyways, because that's why it doesn't have an answer, because an answer requires a thinking principle. And he speaks about a jungle, a wilderness, and being entangled. And so whenever I think about complexity, yeah, I hear that quote from the Buddha in my head. It's funny, again, the tendency for all kinds of reasons, educational reasons, just the list is huge of reasons why we have the habits of consciousness of specificity. Specificity includes the dal that I made yesterday and the spices that are in it. It's not other spices, it's the spices I put in it. Right? The cookies I made yesterday, it was a kitchen day yesterday. I was so happy to be in the kitchen all day. The cookies I made yesterday, the specificity of what's in them. Well, similarly so for all the sadhanas. And again, I'm not just thinking of, although that word is associated with, particular kinds of practices from India, Tibet, etc. But, it doesn't matter. Those who, many of us have known each other for a long time, and we were doing the sadhana of the native tradition for 15 years. We did that. So the specificity of the sadhana, I think, to step back sometimes from that and see again, or I'm using the term see loosely, what's actually being developed. I mean, I just want to cry. What is actually being developed as Each of us is doing those particular things. If we're reciting mantra, we're taking a walk, we're reciting mantra. How often does the practitioner actually stop and think about what words they're saying? Or is it just another habit of consciousness to just go through and do the mantra? Is there benefit to doing just the mantra without contemplating what the mantra means? Yeah, there is some. Sure. If one contemplates what it means, and then the next day contemplates it freshly, is there benefit? Immeasurable. And the Buddha says that over and over again in the sutras. Over and over again, he says exactly that. Well, you know, is there, like I almost quoted, in almost every sutra, interestingly, I reflected on this too in the last couple of days, sparked by the Gachin Rinpoche and a conversation with Jane, and my own current practices and how they've morphed and adjusted through the last 4 months. You know, just being inspired, or you know, the voice in my head, you know, who I call Majashri, or you know, oh, you should do this one today, or you should do this one for the next month. You know, that kind of thing. So where I was going is that the Buddha says, again, in almost every sutra that I've read, and now I'm up to about maybe 30 sutras. If someone recites, reads, contemplates, speaks about, discusses with others this sutra or a portion of this sutra, the benefit that they will the benefit to beings will be immeasurable. But my friends, he says that about almost every, he says that in almost every sutra. And even with the Prajnaparamita, right? The Prajnaparamita texts are, you know, there's so many you can't count them. But again, almost every one of them, at some point, the Buddha says the same thing again. So if we take that literally, we would be confused. Well, what do you mean? Like right now, I'm reading the Akashagarbha Sutra, and I just got through rereading twice in a row the Jnanaloka Sutra, and you know, before that it was another sutra. So, but the same sentences said again and again, and so I found myself, well, wait a minute. That's the specificity in my mind, and a mind that seeks specificity. So what's underneath it? What's actually the teaching? Because the teaching can't be simply to confuse or to feed the limited mind that seeks specificity only. So what's underneath that? The development of bodhicitta. Coming back home to our Buddha nature. That all the teachings are a sameness. And as the Buddha has said multiple times, there is only one Buddha vehicle. The Hinayana, the Mahayana, the Vajrayana, the 9 vehicles of the Vajrayana, I mean, on and on. These are called expedient means. These are for us who need specifics. But there's only one Buddha vehicle. And one Buddha vehicle is not to separate it out from being Catholic or being indigenous or being Celtic. It's not that either. Because all of those in their deep teachings are all developing bodhicitta, all bringing the person back to their Buddha nature. They're just doing it with using different words. Truth is truth. What's real is what's real. Right? And so Trungpa said, just come back to your own mind. Your thoughts again, ladies. I'm sorry I've ended up taking up most of this whole hour.
kind of seems like a process where, you're just in this soup of trying to sort out, learning things as we're young and sorting out what's all the details of life, all the specificity in that regard. But it's kind of confused until it becomes, you get the bigger view and a bigger view and a bigger view. And so it's non-dual. It's the specificity is is clarity from the viewpoint. You build clarity, and then you view from a different angle of clarity, and then the clarity itself becomes simplicity. It kind of seems like that is a natural progression of evolving.
Yes, yes, and I think that Trungpa is trying to walk us through that natural evolving. I'm going to go out of the screen for a second and try to find something really quick on my computer. Maybe somebody else can add a thought while I'm doing that.
If we look at states of mind as being bardos, it's as though the bardos are as infinite as our thoughts. And if we practice whatever method we use to cultivate our own practice at whatever given time, if we practice, then these bardos become more and more inclusive until we reach a point where what we have is a Buddha bardo. I guess that's the best way that I know of to explain it. And this Buddha bardo is entirely based upon bodhicitta. And so the greatest measure of where we're at in our practice is to find that this love that we have for all sentient beings is always more and more inclusive, and seems to incorporate greater and greater polarities without this feeling of interior turmoil or conflict. I guess that's kind of the way that I look at it. So it's as though we're all in these little boats, and we're all going on these streams that become more and more, that include more and more rivulets and become more and more rivers, until one day we wind up in this vast, immeasurable ocean. And, and that's where we're, like all the streams that go throughout the entire world, that's where we're all headed. And because we're practitioners, it's just a process that we're really investing a certain amount of navigation control. It's the way I look at it.
Really well said.
So what page are we at in the book?
212. Touch and go.
That's fairly well said.
Yeah, right. Well, should we close it up for today? We're just a couple minutes ahead of the hour, but I don't think, to start the new chapter might be a little truncated.
You didn't find what you were looking for?
No, I didn't.
Those images that you use, Donna, are just amazing. I never cease to be amazed by the graphics you're able to pull together.
That's nice.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah, this one I really like this one. It's so soft, the Chinese features of it. The whole thing is just so soft.
Okay. See you
Yeah.
all next week.
Yeah, sounds good. Love you all. Stay well. Be empty.
Thank you.
You're
Well, thank
welcome.
you again for
Thank you,
your
Donna.
attention.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Donna. Thank you, everyone.
You're welcome.
Mm.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.